They told him the hotel had no room 313, but he slept in it, and something else slept there with him. This isn't a ghost story. This is a story about being erased, from time, from memory, and from reality itself. Thomas Lang didn't plan on staying at the Hartwell Grand. It just appeared. He had driven through 3 towns looking for a place to crash. Every motel sign flickered, no vacancy. Even GPS was acting up, rerouting, glitching. But then, like a secret unfolding just for him, there it was. The Hartwell Grand. An old building, tucked between 2 modern towers. Like it had no business still standing. He couldn't remember seeing it on the map. Couldn't remember taking the turn onto that street. But he was too tired to question it. Inside, it felt preserved. Not restored, preserved. Like it hadn't changed in 50 years, because no one dared to touch it. No other guests. Just a man at the front desk who looked like he'd been carved from wax. The man slid a brass key across the counter without asking for ID or credit card. Room 313. Thomas blinked. Didn't think hotels still used real keys. The man didn't smile. He just said, "Some rooms never upgrade." Thomas turned toward the elevator, then paused. It was open. Lights on. But no floor buttons. Just 1, 3. He stepped in. As the doors closed, the light flickered, and for a second, the button labels changed. Not numbers. Names. He saw regret, pain, guilt. Then it blinked again, and 3 was back. He reached the 3rd floor. The elevator doors slid open, without a sound. And he stepped into darkness. The hallway was lined with peeling wallpaper. No lights. No sounds. Except one. A ticking clock. But there were no clocks in the hallway. Just the steady tick coming from behind each door he passed. Until he reached 313, where the ticking stopped. The inside of room 313 didn't feel empty. It felt watched. Thomas dropped his bag, turned on the lamp, and froze. The bed was freshly made, but there were 2 indentations on the mattress. Like someone had just been sitting there. He walked to the window. It faced a brick wall. But when he looked closely, he saw something faintly reflected on the glass. A silhouette. Standing behind him. He spun around. Nothing. Just the room. The velvet curtains. The chair. The closet. Open an inch wider than it had been. That night, Thomas dreamed he was in the hallway again, walking toward room 313. But every time he opened the door, it led back to the hallway. Over and over again. Room 313. Hallway. Room 313. Hallway. Each time, the hallway looked less real. Like the walls were melting. The doors dripping like candle wax. Voices whispered from behind the walls. A woman sobbing. A man repeating, "Don't open it, don't open it." When he finally screamed in the dream, he woke up. In the closet. The closet door creaked open as he gasped for air. He stumbled out, sweating. But something was different. The mirror was gone. Replaced with a photo. A faded photo of him. Standing in front of the Hartwell Grand. Smiling. But he had no memory of that moment. And worse, behind him in the photo stood the same desk clerk. Exactly the same. Looking no older. Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that the hotel was slowly becoming more familiar. Every morning, the same cracked cup of coffee was waiting for him on the small table by the window. The same towel in the bathroom. The same shrieking silence. But it wasn't just the routine that felt off. It was the details. On the second morning, when he left the room to get breakfast, he noticed the hallway wasn't the same. The wallpaper seemed a little more faded, like it had been there for decades. The lamps, flickering just enough to make you question whether the lights had been left on for years. And as he passed room 312, he swore he heard something moving inside. He stopped and tried to peek through the small peephole. But before he could focus, he heard footsteps behind him. When he turned, no one was there. He continued down the hallway and reached the stairs. A door opened, just a crack. It was the same gray-haired man from the front desk. He didn't say anything. He just stared. And then he closed the door. Thomas thought about checking out. But when he reached the elevator, the brass doors opened, revealing the same empty, flickering lights. The button above the doors read, 3. He stepped inside without thinking, pressing the button for the ground floor. The elevator began to descend. But instead of the soft hum of the elevator's motor, the noise it made sounded wrong. A grinding sound. Like something was shifting. The elevator jolted to a stop. For a long moment, everything was still. Silent. Until the lights went out. It felt like hours before they flickered back on. The floor button for the ground floor was now replaced with something new, 0. Thomas's reflection in the shiny brass doors smiled at him. He didn't. He tried to get out, but the doors wouldn't open. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw something in the reflection. A person. Standing behind him. He turned around. Nothing. He raised his hand to wipe his brow. And the figure in the reflection mimicked him. Perfectly. Then smiled. His reflection whispered, "You'll be here forever." The elevator jolted again, this time heading back up. By the time he got back to his room, Thomas was convinced something was happening to him. The photo still sat on the desk. And something else. A ticket. It was a train ticket. Stamped, dated, and stamped again. It said, Hartwell Grand Hotel, July 12, 1943. He turned it over. A name was written in small letters, F. Lang. F. Lang. His mind raced. Could it be his father's name? Thomas Lang was his son, yet he'd never heard of a connection to this hotel, not in any story. He grabbed his phone and tried searching for any link to a past visitor. Nothing. The internet was empty, like the name was erased from history. His heartbeat quickened. There had to be an explanation. Maybe it was some twisted joke, an illusion. He stared at the ticket again. Then the date blinked. July 12, 1943. It was almost like the ink shifted. And the date changed to March 13, 1977. Thomas tried to forget the ticket, but the mystery kept pulling at him. The hotel itself was starting to feel too real. The wallpaper, the hallway, the elevator, they didn't change. They had always been this way. The next night, he sat in the corner, trying to gather himself. That's when he heard it. A woman's voice. It came from the air vent above him, whispering. He knows. He remembers. He looked up, breath catching. But there was no one there. He stood, walking slowly toward the closet where the mirror used to hang. He stared into the empty space. Then, there it was again, that faint smell of metal. A soft rattle from within the walls. Scratching. He walked to the wall, hands trembling. As his fingers brushed against it, a crack appeared. He pressed harder. The wall gave way, and what he saw inside. A face. A man's face, frozen in the wall. His mouth open, in a silent scream. Thomas couldn't let go of the face he saw in the wall. The moment the crack opened, the pale man's eyes seemed to follow him, tracking his every movement. But as he looked closer, something unsettling dawned on him. The face wasn't real. The more he stared, the more the face seemed to blend into the structure of the wall, like it had been part of it for years. It wasn't a separate thing, it was the wall. It was inside the hotel, breathing with the building. But why? The truth began to twist in his mind. Thomas realized this wasn't just about a creepy room, a strange photo, or some forgotten ghost. This was something older, a deep, gnawing force embedded in the hotel itself. The ticket he found was no accident. It wasn't just an old memento. He felt an urge to hold it, as though it were guiding him to something. He grabbed the ticket again, staring at the name, F. Lang. It was his father's name, but there was no record of him ever visiting the Hartwell Grand. Thomas frantically searched through every personal memory he could, every scrap of paper and photograph from his past. Nothing about the hotel. Nothing about the name, F. Lang. Then it hit him. His father disappeared when Thomas was a teenager, right around the time he would have been an adult. Everyone assumed he had just walked out of his life. But what if he hadn't walked away? What if he had left through the hotel? What if his father had checked into room 313 and never checked out? The walls of the hotel felt like they were closing in around him. Lang had disappeared just like everyone else who had checked in, only to be swallowed by the hotel's dark history. The hallway felt longer than ever. The lights above him flickered, making the darkness seem alive. Each step echoed, and with each step, the hotel seemed to shift. By now, Thomas had seen too much. His hand trembled as he gripped the brass key to his room. He stood at the door to room 313 for what felt like an eternity before finally turning the handle. When he stepped inside, the room was colder than it had been the night before. The air felt thicker, almost oppressive. Something was watching him. He went straight to the closet, hoping to uncover more answers. But as his hand touched the door, he heard it. A whisper. "You know too much." He spun around, breath shallow, heart pounding. But no one was there. The closet door creaked open on its own, as though it had been waiting for him. Inside, the mirror was back, only it wasn't the one he had seen before. This was different. This mirror was cracked, with long black streaks running down it like veins. He stepped closer, and for the first time, the mirror spoke. Not in a whisper, not in a voice, but in his mind. A voice that felt like it was coming from everywhere. "You're not meant to leave. You're meant to stay." Thomas staggered back. "Stay?" he whispered, feeling his mind begin to fracture. He looked around the room, but nothing made sense anymore. The walls were moving. The wallpaper seemed to pulse, as though the room itself had a heartbeat. The floors tilted, the furniture shifted. And as he looked into the mirror once again, he saw something horrifying. The face from the wall. It wasn't just staring at him. It was smiling. But it was smiling because it knew. It knew what was happening. It knew he couldn't leave. As Thomas backed away, the room seemed to twist. The air grew heavier, thicker with dread. And then, just when he thought he couldn't take it anymore, he saw something impossible. The door to room 313 opened, by itself. But the hallway outside was gone. Instead, he stared into a black abyss. A void. Beyond the door stood something in the shadows, a figure, its face too obscure to see. It was waiting. "You don't get to choose," the figure said in a voice that was both his own and not his own. "It's too late for you now." His breath caught in his throat. That voice wasn't just some trick. That was his own voice. He had been here before. His mind screamed to run, but his body felt heavy, like the very air in the room was holding him in place. Suddenly, everything clicked. His father's name. His own reflection. The ticket that changed dates. The Hartwell Grand was alive. The hotel absorbed people, memories, identities, lives. And each time someone entered room 313, they didn't just stay in the hotel. They became the hotel. Lang wasn't lost. He had become part of the building. And now, Thomas was no different. He was just the next piece of the puzzle. A cog in an endless machine. The hotel had never let him go. It had brought him here, led him to this room, to his father's fate. He stepped into the abyss. And as the door slammed shut behind him, he realized he was no longer Thomas Lang. He was someone else. Someone who would never leave.